Dear students, Assalamu alaikum. Today I am again with another topic. As you know, we are discussing magnetic effects of current for class 12th, and today we are going to discuss the Earth's magnetic field. As you can see from the left side of this page, Earth's magnetism, or what we call Earth's magnetic field. Dear students, you know that when we suspend a ball magnet freely, its north pole points towards the geographical north and its south pole points towards the geographical south. If you try to put it in east-west direction and let it free, it will again align itself in the north-south direction. So the freely suspended ball magnet always aligns itself in the north-south direction. Its north pole aligns in the north geographical north direction, and its south pole sets itself in the geographical south direction. Now, this proves that Earth has its own magnetism. There is a jet magnet embedded inside the Earth. So, what is the cause of Earth's magnetism? Where from does Earth get its magnetism? So many theories have been given, and among them, one of the theories is given by William Gilbert. He suggested that Earth's magnetism is due to the molten charge in metallic fluid, that is the core of the Earth. There are so many metals, and these metals are in a molten form, and they are charged. With the rotation of the Earth, when the Earth rotates, the charged metallic fluid also rotates with the Earth, which gives rise to the current inside the core of the Earth. So, this is a William Gilbert. He suggested that the Earth's magnetism is due to the rotation of the charged metallic core of the Earth. Because when Earth rotates, the charged metal core also rotates. Then uh, mm, scientist whose name was Professor Blackett, he suggested that every substance is made of charged particles, electrons and protons. We know that with the rotation of the Earth, the charged particles also rotate, which give rise to the current and become magnetized. Similarly, then came another person. He gave his own theory. His name was William Gilbert. He he assumed that a huge magnet is lying deep inside the Earth, with its south pole towards the geographical north and north pole towards the geographical south of the Earth. And when a bar magnet is suspended freely, its north pole points towards the Earth's magnetic south pole and vice versa. Now, what is geographical axis? We have two axes here. One is geographical axis and the other is magnetic axis. A line joining the geographical north and geographical south poles of the Earth is called its geographical axis. Then there is magnetic axis. It is a line joining the magnetic north pole and the magnetic south pole of the Earth. Magnetic axis and geographical axis do not coincide, but rather they make an angle of 20 degree with each other. That is, the magnetic axis makes an angle of 20 degree with the geographical axis, as you can see from the figure which is on page first. Now, geographical meridian. It is a plane just like the plane paper sheet of your notebook, plane paper of your notebook. It is just like that. A vertical plane passing through the geographical axis is called geographic meridian. So if you put a plane sheet vertically, you take a plane sheet in your hand and put vertically it on the geographical axis. Then this vertical sheet of paper is called, or what we call it, a plane sheet, is called a geographical meridian. Similarly, if you take another sheet of paper which becomes a plane and you put it on the magnetic axis of the earth, then it becomes a magnetic meridian. The sheet of paper is called a magnetic meridian there. Now, what are magnetic elements? The physical quantities which completely determine the intensity of the Earth's magnetic field, both in magnitude and direction, are called magnetic elements. There are three magnetic elements of the Earth. The first one is magnetic declination. Now, what is magnetic declination? The magnetic declination at a place is defined as the angle between the geographic meridian and the magnetic meridian. As I told you, you take the two sheets and place it on the magnetic axis and the geographical axis. Then there will be an angle between the two sheets, and that angle is known as magnetic declination. So you can define it, the angle between the magnetic axis and the geographical axis of the earth is called magnetic meridian, or magnetic declination, or the angle between the magnetic meridian and the geographical meridian is called magnetic declination, and this angle is denoted by theta. And as I already told you, magnetic axis and geographical axis, or magnetic meridian and geographical meridian, they do not coincide, but they make an angle of 20 degree with each other. So the magnetic declination of the earth is 20 degree. That is, theta is equal to 20 degree, as I have shown in the figure. Now there are two sheets of paper, as you can see from the fig. One is A, B, C, D, and the other is A dash, B dash, C dash, D dash. A, B, C, D represents the magnetic meridian, and A dash, B dash, C dash, D dash represents the geographical meridian. Similarly, C D represents magnetic axis, and C dash D represents geographical axis. The angle CDC dash, which is equal to angle BAB dash, is equal to theta, represents magnetic declination. Magnetic declination arises due to the fact that the magnetic axis does not coincide with the geographic axis of rotation of the earth. Now, magnetic dip or magnetic inclination. The first one was magnetic declination, the other one is magnetic inclination. Magnetic inclination or magnetic dip, it is also known as magnetic dip, at a place is defined as the angle which the direction of the total intensity of the earth's magnetic field makes with the horizontal direction, as you can see from the figure. And this magnetic inclination or magnetic dip, it is also an angle, and it is denoted by del. As you can see from the figure, when you take a compass needle, or sorry, dip needle. It is a dip needle. Dip needle means which rotates vertically. As you have seen a compass needle, when a compass needle it rotates horizontally. Remember this thing. Compass needle rotates horizontally, whereas a dip needle rotates vertically, as you can see from the figure. So if you take a dip needle and put it on the surface of the earth, and then draw a horizontal line, you will see that this dip needle will make some angle with the horizontal line, as you can see from the figure. uh, and that angle is denoted by del, and this angle is known as magnetic inclination. So what is magnetic inclination? So this, the direction of this needle will show you the total intensity of the magnetic field, whereas this horizontal line represents the horizontal direction. So the angle between horizontal direction and the total magnetic field, it is del. Now if you take this dip needle to the poles, north pole or south pole, you will see that it will make an angle of 90 degree, because the north pole of this dip needle will be attracted by the south pole of the earth. And if you take this dip needle to the south pole of the earth, there the earth's south pole will attract the north pole of this dip needle, and it will make an angle 0 degree. Similarly, if you take it to the south pole, sorry, north pole, then the north pole of the earth will attract the south pole of this dip needle, and it will make an angle of 0 degree with the sorry, is an angle of 90 degree. At both the cases, it will be 90 degree. You can do it yourself, or you can see it yourself from the figure. So at poles, the magnetic inclination, or what we call it, magnetic dip. Dip means it just comes down as you dip your finger in a water. Similarly, it dips. It dips down. So at poles, it makes an angle of 90 degrees. So magnetic inclination or magnetic dip at poles, south pole and north pole of the earth is 90 degrees. Now, if you take this dip needle uh, at the equator, you will see that this dip needle aligns itself in the horizontal direction, so that the angle del will be 0. It is parallel at equator. This dip needle remains parallel with the horizontal direction. So that at that place, that is at the equator, the magnetic dip inclination or magnetic dip will be 0. And at other places between the equator and the poles, if you go from equator to the north pole, this dip angle of dip or magnetic inclination, it will increase. And if you go from equator to south pole, it will again increase. But it will be maximum at the poles and 0 at the equator. Now horizontal component of Earth's magnetic field. As you can see again from this figure, B, in this figure, B is neither in horizontal direction. You can see this is B. So this line represents B. So B is represents the magnetic field of the earth. As we know that magnetic field B is a vector, so it will have two components. One component will be along the horizontal direction, that is in this direction, and another component will be in the vertical direction. So the component of this magnetic field B, when it is neither in horizontal direction nor in vertical direction, then it will have two components, one in the vertical direction and the other in the horizontal direction. The component which is in the horizontal direction is known as the horizontal component of the Earth's magnetic field. So you can see from this H, This is the horizontal component of the Earth's magnetic field B, and V represents the vertical component of the magnetic field B. As you might have learned it about this horizontal component, vertical component of a vector in class 11th. So H will be B cos del, because here it is not theta, it is del, the angle between B and H, it is del. So H horizontal component is equal to B cos del, and the vertical component is equal to B sin del. And if we square both sides, we get H square is equal to B square cos square del. Similarly, if we square both sides of the equation above, we get V square is equal to B square sin square del. Let us denote this equation by 2. Now when we add equation first and equation 2, we get B square cos square del plus B square sin square del, B square cos square del plus B square sin square del is equal to H square plus V square, which implies cos square del plus sin square del. We will take common B square from these two. We get cos square del plus sin square del B square is equal to H square plus V square. But we know that cos square del plus sin square del is equal to 1. This implies B square is equal to H square plus V square, and ultimately we get B is equal to under root of H square plus V square. Now let us denote this equation by 3. Also from the figure you can see that B sin del by B cos del is equal to V by H. If we divide V by H from uh, here, we know that H is equal to B cos del, and V is equal to B sin del. And if we divide V by H, we will get V by H is equal to B sin del by B cos del. B and B will cancel. It means V by H will be equal to tan del. And let us denote this equation by equation 4. So equation 4, we get tan del is equal to V by H. The value of H is different at different places. As I told you, at poles del is equal to 90 degree, and when del is 90 degree, you will get H is equal to B cos del, which implies H is equal to B cos 90 is equal to 0. That is H is equal to, because cos 90 is 0. So H will be equal to 0. So at poles, the horizontal component of the Earth's magnetic field is 0. The total magnetic field will be in vertical direction at poles, at North Pole and at South Pole. There will be no horizontal component, because the magnetic field will not, no component of the magnetic field will be in horizontal direction at poles. So at poles, the horizontal component is 0, and we have only one component. The total magnetic field of the Earth will be equal to the vertical component of the magnetic field. Similarly, at equator, the del is equal to 0, which implies H is equal to B cos del, or B cos 0 is equal to B. That implies H is equal to B. Similarly, at the equator, there will be no vertical component of the Earth's magnetic field, because the dip needle will align itself in the horizontal direction. So the total magnetic field will be in the horizontal direction. The instrument used to measure H, that is the horizontal component of the Earth, is known as vibration magnetometer or deflection magnetometer. With the help of these two instruments, if you have these two instruments in the laboratory, you can use them to find the horizontal component of the Earth's magnetic field at different places, or the location where you live. You can also find the horizontal component of the Earth's magnetic field in your locality by using a vibration magnetometer, which is available in your laboratory. Maybe or may not, we may have it, I haven't seen, but it is in many laboratories we have these instruments, vibration magnetometer and deflection magnetometer. Now let us discuss some important elements which we will need in the in calculating the magnetic field of the earth. One is magnetic permeability. It is the ability of a material to permit the passage of magnetic lines of force through it. The degree or extent to which magnetic field can penetrate or permeate a material is called relative permeability and is denoted by mu r. So what is permeability? If we have a substance, say aluminum, copper or wood extra, and if we put it in a magnetic field, if it allows the magnetic lines of force to pass through them, then we say the extent, greater the extent it allows the magnetic lines of force to pass through them, we say that its permeability is high. So, and this permeability is denoted by mu r, and mu r is equal to B by B naught, where B is the flux density in the material and B naught is the flux density of the vacuum. What does it mean? First, we will calculate how many magnetic lines of force pass through the vacuum. When the magnetic field is produced by a permanent magnet or bar magnet, what we call, or a wire carrying current, it produces a magnetic field, and we see how many lines do pass through the vacuum. Suppose if we have a room, we evacuate it, we take all its air out of the room and make it a vacuum. Then we see that how many lines are passing or emitted by this the source magnetic field. Then we bring a material, say wood, copper, etc., and see how many lines pass through the wood or pass through the copper or pass through the aluminum. So let me just confine it to one material, say wood. First, we will bring a magnet and put it in our room. We will evacuate the room. We will take all its air out of it so that it becomes a vacuum. Then we calculate, suppose, say the source emits 10 magnetic lines of force. So B naught will be 10. Remember this thing. Flux density will be, that's B naught, it will be 10. Then we see how many lines pass through the wood. Say if only 5 lines or 6 lines pass through the wood, then the flux density of the material will be 5 or 6. And when we divide 6 by 10, then we get a quantity that is known as relative permeability. First one was the permeability when the material was placed in vacuum. Then the other one was the permeability when the material was placed in when a material was placed in the magnetic field. And first one was where magnet was in vacuum, lines were passing through vacuum. Then the second one was when the lines were passing through the material. So when we divide those two permeabilities, we get a relative permeability, that is mu r. You can also define it as mu r is equal to mu by mu naught, where mu is the permeability when the lines are passing through the medium or say material, and mu naught is the permeability when the lines are passing through vacuum. And when we divide mu by mu naught or B by B naught, we get relative permeability. So as I have already shown it here, mu r is also equal to mu upon mu naught. Now the other element is magnetic induction. The other quantity we are going to discuss is magnetic induction, flux density. It is also known as flux density. We know that the force experienced by a charge when it is placed, moving charge, when it is placed in a magnetic field, is F is equal to QVB sine theta. Now if theta is equal to 90 degree, V is its velocity. It's moving. The charge is moving with a velocity of 1 meter per second, and the magnitude of the charge is 1 coulomb. Then F will become equal to B, because Q is 1 coulomb, V is 1, B is 1 Tesla. Or say, sorry, sine theta, theta is 90 degrees, sin theta will be 1. F will be equal to B. Thus, magnetic induction or flux density B is the force experienced by a unit positive charge moving with unit velocity in a direction perpendicular to the direction of the magnetic field. The magnetic field produced in a material is called magnetic induction. Now, magnetizing force or magnetizing intensity, or you can call it magnetizing field. The degree or extent to which a magnetic field can magnetize a material is called magnetic intensity, and it is denoted by H. We know that in solenoid B is equal to, we have calculated it in our early classes, B is equal to mu naught and I, where mu naught is the permeability of the free space, or and is number of turns per unit length, and I is the current in the current loop or current in the wire. So B is equal to mu naught H, where H is equal to N into I is called magnetic intensity. So magnetic intensity is greater the current, greater will be the extent or greater will be the magnetic field produced by the current. And if the number of turns are large, then uh, greater will be the magnetic field. So H is equal to N is called magnetic intensity. H can be increased, as you can see from the relation, if we increase N or if we increase I or if we increase both. If you want to increase magnetic intensity, what you have to do, you have to increase the number of turns if you cannot increase current, and if you cannot increase number of turns, you can increase current, or if you can increase both, you can increase both so that H can be increased, magnetic intensity can be increased. If there is free space inside the solenoid, then B naught is equal to mu naught H, and if there is a material inside the solenoid, then B is equal to mu H. Now, intensity of magnetization. The degree or extent to which a material, specimen, it can be copper, iron, steel, whatsoever, can be magnetized when placed in a magnetic field is called intensity of magnetization and is denoted by I. Remember, this is I, this is intensity of magnetization. This is not current because I have written it in bold letter. So what does it mean, intensity of magnetization? If magnetizing force is high and you put a wood in front of it and you want it to get magnetized, it will not get. So magnetizing force is high, but intensity of magnetization is low. It is nil because wood will not get magnetized at all. Similarly, if you put a steel, copper, etc., they will get magnetized to different extents, which means that if they are placed in the same magnetizing force, in the same magnetic intensity, but they will still get magnetized to different extents. So I is equal to m by v, where m is magnetic moment produced in the material specimen and v is the volume of the specimen. Now I is equal to m by v is equal to, we know that magnetic moment of a bar magnet, it is given by m, where m is the strength of the poles of the bar magnet into 2l, where 2l is the length between the north pole and south pole of the bar magnet, divided by volume. We can write volume as area into length. Area into length, that's A into 2l. So I will become ultimately equal to m by A, where m is magnetic strength of each pole and A is cross sectional area. Now, after this, we have magnetic susceptibility. The property which determines how easily a substance can be magnetized is called magnetic susceptibility. Sorry, its definition is not completely written here, but I can tell you the property which determines how easily a specimen, a substance, a material can be magnetized is called magnetic susceptibility, and it is denoted by chi. It is not x. You can write it as it is just like x, but it is written read as chi. Chi m, where chi m is equal to I, intensity of magnetization divided by H, that is magnetic intensity. I is intensity of magnetization and H is magnetic intensity. When we divide these two, we get chi. What does susceptibility means? How easily a substance can get magnetized. Some substances get easily magnetized, some do not get easily magnetized. So one who gets easily magnetized has more susceptibility compared to the one which does not easily get magnetized. And if a substance does not get magnetized at all, then its susceptibility is zero. Now relation between mu r and chi, that is relative permeability and magnetic susceptibility. When a magnetic material is placed in the magnetizing field of magnetic intensity H, the material gets magnetized. We know that. The total magnetic field induction B produced in the material is B is equal to B naught plus Bm, where B naught uh, is B is equal to B naught plus Bm. B implies B is equal to mu naught H plus mu naught I. This implies B is equal to mu naught H plus I. Now, chi m is equal to I upon H, as you can see from the above definition. This implies H chi m is equal to I, or this implies B is equal to mu naught H plus H chi m. We can take common H, then B will be equal to mu naught H I plus chi m, or B is equal to B naught I plus chi m, because mu naught H is equal to B naught, or B by B naught is equal to 1 plus chi m, and we know that B by B naught is equal to relative permeability, that is mu r is equal to 1 plus chi m. So our tomorrow's topic will be hysteresis. We will discuss hysteresis tomorrow. So but you have to remember these terms. Thank you. See you inshallah tomorrow.